Thank you so much. I think it's good. No, it's good. Yeah. I think it's good, yeah. Inshallah. Hopefully. All right.
Sallallahu Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasul Allah. Sallallahu alayka ya Mawlaya ya Aba Abdullah. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of the ambassador of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, Muslim ibn Aqeel, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And to hasten the reappearance of the 12th Imam, Al-Imam Sahib Al-Asri Wal-Zaman, Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Farajah, Sallu ala Muhammad with the loudest of your voices. When we commemorate the story and the legacy of the journey of Abi Abdullah Al-Hussein alayhi salam, we often begin from the day in which Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam arrives to the city of Karbala. And in some instances, we commemorate Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam and mention the story in which he said his goodbyes to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And we're all familiar with the dream that he had when he slept in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. But rarely would we find detailed speeches regarding the journey of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam from the moment that he left Medina until the second day of Muharram. What happened from the 28th of Rajab, the day in which Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, his companions and the Ahlul Bayt, his family, leave the city of Medina. What happens from that very day until the day of Ashura, many of it is left uncovered. And even the companions of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, many of us hear the stories of Abil Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, of Habib ibn Mudahir, of Ali al-Akbar, of al-Qasim, of maybe John, of Abis. But when it comes to the details and the specifics about their lives, how many of us truly know what happened to them? And what did they do throughout their life to achieve that amazing status, that special status of dying under the hands of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam? And many times we neglect the other companions, especially the companions of Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, who were not there on the day of Ashura. The likes of Muslim ibn Aqeel, of Hani ibn Urwa. Without Muslim ibn Aqeel, Karbala wouldn't have been Karbala. But he wasn't there on the day of Karbala. He was the first martyr or the second martyr of the journey of Karbala, but he wasn't there on that day. But if it wasn't for him, Karbala wouldn't have been there. How many of us truly know the details about the life of Muslim ibn Aqeel? Not many. How many of us know what led Muslim ibn Aqeel to be with Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam and to reach that high status in the eyes of Abi Abdullah? We often hear the claims that the Kufans betrayed Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, and the Kufans were actually the ones who killed Abi Abdullah. We often hear it. But is that true? Well, we can't really answer these type of questions if we don't know the life of Muslim ibn Aqeel. If you're not aware of the life of Muslim ibn Aqeel, especially towards the end of his life, then you definitely do not know the story of Karbala. What were the events that led to Karbala? How did Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam respond to the events? If we're not aware of the story of Muslim ibn Aqeel, ahsantum, then we are definitely not aware of the journey of Karbala in its entirety. Therefore, in the minutes that we have today, let us discuss the life and the legacy of the ambassador, Safir al-Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, the ambassador of Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, in great detail, and answer some of the questions that pertain to this topic. But before we do so, we need a very loud salawat in honor of Muslim ibn Aqeel. Muslim ibn Aqeel was born on the 7th year of Hijrah. Although there is much debate around the specific year. If you open the history books, most of the time you will read that he was born on the 22nd year of Hijrah. However, when you do further analysis, you will realize that Muslim ibn Aqeel was actually born on the 7th year of Hijrah. And let me tell you why. We all know that Muslim ibn Aqeel had many children, including his son Abdullah, who was 26 years old at the time of Karbala, and he fought bravely and died at the hands of Abi Abdullah. Now, if we say that Muslim ibn Aqeel was born on the 22nd year of Hijrah, it means that he died at the age of 38 in the year 60 of Hijrah. So you're telling me that Muslim ibn Aqeel died at the age of 38 and his son died a month later at the age of 28? Doesn't make sense. It would require that Muslim ibn Aqeel would be a father at the age of 10, which not only is improbable, but impossible. Therefore, we conclude that he was born on the 7th year of Hijrah in the city of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, which makes him a Sahabi, even in the eyes of the other schools of thought. Muslim ibn Aqeel was born as the son of Aqeel ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib. In regards to his mother, when you read about his mother, the lie detector, the Umayyad lie detector begins to beep. You will begin to notice many lies by the Umayyads in regards to the mother of Muslim ibn Aqeel. You will read the story that one day Aqeel ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib, went to Sham to visit Muawiyah. On his way out, he saw a very beautiful lady, a servant that would work at the palace of Yazid. So he looks at Muawiyah and he tells him, I would like to purchase the servant, the slave that you have. He tells him she is worth 40,000 dirhams, and that's a huge number. So Aqeel purchases that slave. Now, there are multiple issues with the story. Number one, as we know, as we mentioned, Muslim was born in the 7th year of Hijrah. In the 7th year of Hijrah, Muawiyah was still in Mecca. And in fact, Muawiyah was not even Muslim at the time. He became Muslim at the 10th year or the 8th year of Hijrah, at the conquest of Mecca. So that's number one. Muawiyah was not in Sham and he wasn't even Muslim at the time. So Aqeel wouldn't even encounter him. Number two, Aqeel was known to be blind towards the end of his life. And by that time, he would have definitely been blind by the time that Muawiyah actually moved to Sham. Therefore, how would Aqeel see this beautiful lady, as the narration describes it, and asks for this slave? And lastly, Aqeel was a genealogist. If anyone in Mecca, if anyone in Quraysh, if anyone in Medina wanted to marry a woman, they would immediately go and ask for the advice of Aqeel, because Aqeel knew the ins and outs of all the tribes. He would tell you this person is the son of this person, is the son of this person, all the way to Adam. That's the power, that's the knowledge that Aqeel possessed. That is why we hear the story when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam wanted to marry al-Baneen. Who did he go to? He went to Aqeel. And he told Aqeel, "Oh Aqeel, find me a woman that is the daughter of the bravest man in Arabia." Aqeel, without any hesitation, told him, "You should marry al-Baneen. For her father is the bravest of men, the most courageous of warriors." So now you try and come and convince me that Aqeel would look for a slave in Muawiyah's palace? But the Umayyads, especially when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they aim to add as many lies in their biographies and their lives as much as possible. Even if the lie is so absurd, it doesn't matter. Try and ruin that reputation. Try and ruin that image that they have. But at the end of the day, people with brains, people with analysis, can immediately detect the lies of the Umayyads. So the wife of Aqeel, according to our narrations, was a woman from the area of Nabat, modern day Jordan. And her name was Ulayya. That's how much we know about the mother of Aqeel. Anyways, Aqeel grew up very closely to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa in the very first years of his life. It is narrated that one day Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was sitting in the room with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. They're sitting and they're chatting. How beautiful is that? The two greatest of Allah's creation are sitting in one room and chatting. Inshallah, we all have the chance of sitting next to them in Jannah. Anyways, so Amir al-Mu'mineen is asking Rasulullah multiple questions, and then he asks, "Oh Rasulullah, do you like my brother Aqeel?" Rasulullah looks at him and he says, "Of course. By Allah, I love Aqeel two loves. I love him for two reasons. I love him because I love Aqeel himself, and I love him for the love that his father, Abi Talib, had for Aqeel." It seems like Aqeel was the favorite son for Abu Talib. So he says, "I love him for two reasons. Because I love him, he's my cousin and I love him, and because of Abu Talib's love for Aqeel." And then he looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and he tells him, "The son of Aqeel will die out of love for your son, O Ali." And then Amir Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, according to the narration, begins to cry. If Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi cries for a Muslim, for Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam in his lifetime, how can we not cry for Hussein after he died? Aqeel continues to be loyal to Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, to Amir al-Mu'mineen, to Ali Hassan throughout his lifetime. He fights, he learns from the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and he fights bravely in the wars of Amir al-Mu'mineen against Muawiyah, against the Khawarij. It is narrated that in the battle of Siffin, he fights along with Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, with al-Hassan. And how do you not expect him to fight bravely if he was learned to fight at the hands of the greatest warrior, the greatest teacher after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and that is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallu ala Muhammad. So Muslim ibn Aqeel fights and learns under Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He lives in Kufa with Amir al-Mu'mineen. And after the tragic death, the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he moves along with al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and stays in the city of Medina and continues there until the final moments of the life of al-Imam al-Hasan. And he remains there with Imam al-Hussein, loyal. Wherever Hussein would go, you would see that Muslim ibn Aqeel is there with him. Until the year 60 of Hijrah comes, and Muslim ibn Aqeel goes with Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam and his family towards the city of Mecca. That is the last time he stays in the city of Medina. That is the last time Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam stayed in the city of Medina. So they head together to the city of Mecca on the 28th of Rajab, and they arrive to Mecca. When they get there, Ramadan begins. Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam on the 10th day of Ramadan begins to receive letters from notable members of Kufa. And when I say notable members, I truly mean notable members. When you have Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi sending you a letter, when you have Hani bin Urwa sending you a letter, when you have Maytham al-Tammar sending you a letter, these are not just any letters. These are not letters written by you and I. These are letters by the friends, the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. The men who grew up at the hands of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The men who fought alongside Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein in the battles of Nahrawan, Siffin. And within a period of 5 days, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam receives 12,000 letters from Kufa. 12,000 within 5 days. So Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam realizes that there's a huge support for this cause. And they all tell him, our swords are with you. Whatever you want, we will do. And we want you to be our ruler instead of Yazid. So the message is very clear. It's not ambiguous. They make it clear that if we need to go to war for you, O Hussein, we will. Therefore, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam sends Muslim ibn Aqeel to Kufa. He writes a letter, and in the letter he says, I have sent to you my brother, my cousin, and my trustee. My brother, my cousin, and my trustee. You see the closeness of Muslim to Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. You see the status of Muslim in the eyes of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And he says in the letter, if Muslim ibn Aqeel sends back to me that what you have said in those letters are true, and there is a consensus amongst you that you want me as your leader, then I shall come to the city of Kufa and we will begin our movement. So Muslim ibn Aqeel alayhi salam heads to the city of Kufa. As he enters the city of Kufa, thousands upon thousands of men celebrate his entrance. And he settles in the house of Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. We all know Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, the man who killed the enemies of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam later on. He stays at the house of Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Why did he choose the house of Al-Mukhtar? Because Al-Mukhtar is the son-in-law of Al-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir. Al-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir was the governor of Kufa at the time. So it was the most strategic place to stay, because the son-in-law of the governor would of course have some level of immunity. Therefore he stays at the house of Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Within the same night, 18,000 men pledge allegiance to Muslim ibn Aqeel and Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. 18,000 men. Therefore, when we realize that Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam mobilized and went to Kufa, towards Kufa, he had a solid plan. It wasn't like he didn't have any support and it was a suicidal mission. No, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam was a favorite at one time to win the battle and to defeat Yazid. If you had Maytham al-Tammar, Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, Hani ibn Urwa, Habib ibn Mudahar, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Muslim ibn Aqeel, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ali al-Akbar in one line, you would think that these men would lose a battle? If you had the 18,000 people of Kufa in Karbala, would you think Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam wouldn't have won? So when Muslim ibn Aqeel realizes the huge support that he has, he immediately writes a letter to Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam that the city of Kufa is ready for you. Come towards Kufa, O Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Now, Al-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir, the governor of Kufa, was appointed by Yazid. He refuses to engage in any battle with Muslim ibn Aqeel. He says, as long as Muslim does not attack me and the city of Kufa, then I will let him be free. And of course, Muslim ibn Aqeel is not going to start the war. Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, on the day of Karbala, refuses to begin the war. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam teach us that you do not start a war. If they attack you, you attack back in self-defense. But you do not launch war, especially against believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if they do not truly mean it. But if they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, you preserve their sanctity. Unless they come and attack you. So Muslim ibn Aqeel did not attack An-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir nor the palace. He kept it as is. And An-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir refuses to attack Muslim ibn Aqeel, and he says, if they do not attack me, I have nothing to do to attack them. Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan, Umar ibn Sa'ad, they're in Kufa. They realize that the situation is turning against the Umayyads at that moment. They immediately write letters to Yazid ibn Muawiyah in Sham and tell him essentially that your governor in Kufa is useless. If you want Kufa to stay loyal to you, interfere immediately. So Yazid ibn Muawiyah reads the letter, and there's an advisor to Yazid who was also an advisor to his father by the name of Sir John. Some people call him Sir June, and some say that his actual name was Sir John. He was a Christian. Anyways, regardless, Sir June, Sir John, this man looks at him and tells him, Yazid, there is only one solution. If you want Kufa to stay for you, there's only one solution. And this is the solution that your father Muawiyah would have chosen. So he says it in a way that Yazid would of course agree. He tells him, what is the solution? He says, appoint your current governor of Basra, Ibn Ziyad, appoint him to be the governor of Kufa. And give him a few months and he'll solve the whole thing for you. Yazid ibn Muawiyah accepts. So he sends a letter to Ibn Ziyad, and he tells him, Ibn Ziyad, I want you to be the new governor of Kufa. Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, in Basra, he was having a good time, no headaches, has total control over the people of Basra, he's enjoying the palace, the parties. He tells him, okay, I'll take this endeavor for you, but under one condition. When you appoint me the governor of Kufa, you will still keep me as the governor of Basra. I'll be governor of two places. Is that okay for you? He tells him, okay. As long as you solve the problem of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. He tells him, okay. Ibn Ziyad immediately begins to head to the city of Kufa. Now Basra is not that far from Kufa, as you know. So within a week or so, he arrives to the city of Kufa. When he enters the city of Kufa, Ibn Ziyad was so clever. He wears the clothing of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Abi Abdullah at the time was known to wear a black turban. So he wears a black turban, he sits on his horse, and he covers his face and his body. So the ignorance of the people of Kufa, they see this man entering with a huge army, they think it's Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And they begin to celebrate all until he arrives to the palace. When he arrives to the palace, he reveals his identity and he enters the palace and he kicks out al-Bashir ibn al-Nu'man. Al-Nu'man ibn al-Bashir. So he kicks him out and he immediately takes over the city of Kufa. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The first order that Ibn Ziyad has is a order for mass incarceration. He launches a mass incarceration campaign against anyone who had any ounce of power or influence in the city of Kufa who supported Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Immediately you see the likes of Maytham al-Tammar, al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi in jail. That's number one. Number two, he launches a system called the system of Urafat. What did these Urafat do? He would appoint one person from every area, and he would tell that person, you are responsible for this neighborhood. If anything happens, you immediately report to me, and if you fail to report any incident, your head is on the line. It's very similar to what we have in Iraq, Mukhtar. Every area has a Mukhtar. It's very similar to that system. Anyways, so he appoints these Urafat. Lastly, he meets a man by the name of Aqeel or Aqeel. He tells this man, "Oh Aqeel, I will give you 3,000 dirhams and I want you to find Muslim ibn Aqeel. Use these 3,000 dirhams to go to any of the close companions of Muslim ibn Aqeel and tell them that you have khumus and you have to give it to Muslim ibn Aqeel as the ambassador of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when you find Muslim ibn Aqeel, come back and report to me exactly where Muslim ibn Aqeel is." So Aqeel goes to the city of Kufa. He goes to the city of Kufa and he goes to the masjid and he begins to look at the people. And he notices one face, one person stand out. And that was Muslim ibn Awsajah, the man who died at the hands of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Karbala. So he looks at Muslim and he tells him, "Oh Muslim, I want to give this amount of khumus to to Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, and I know that his ambassador, Muslim ibn Aqeel, is in the city. Muslim becomes fearful. He realizes that this man is a little sketchy, as you would call it. So he tells him, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. But from the first interaction, Aqeel realizes that Muslim ibn Awsajah can actually take him to Muslim ibn Aqeel. He sees the features of his face and he realizes that this man is hiding something from me. So he comes the next day, the third day. A few days he keeps on persisting. I want to see Muslim ibn Aqeel. I want to see Muslim ibn Aqeel. I want to see Muslim ibn Aqeel. Until he tells him one line. He tells him, O Muslim ibn Awsajah, if I die right now and I was not able to give my khumus to Muslim ibn Aqeel, on the day of judgment I will look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and would tell him, you were the reason why I couldn't give my khumus. So Muslim ibn Awsajah tells him, okay. So he takes him to Muslim ibn Aqeel, and Muslim ibn Aqeel at that point, he was staying in the house of Hani bin Urwa. So he's staying at the house of Hani bin Urwa. This man immediately gives the money to Muslim ibn Aqeel. He asks him a few questions just to, make the story a bit better. Remove any suspicions that he had, and he left. He immediately goes and reports it to Ibn Ziyad. Muslim ibn Aqeel was smart. He noticed that this man is not trustworthy. So he immediately leaves the house of Hani bin Urwa. When he leaves the house of Hani bin Urwa, he realizes all of a sudden that the men of Ibn Ziyad come to the house of Hani bin Urwa and they capture Hani bin Urwa and they take him to the palace of Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad interrogates him, tells him, where is Muslim ibn Aqeel? He refuses to tell him. He tells him, if Muslim ibn Aqeel were under my feet, I wouldn't even remove my feet to show him to you. You think I would tell you where Muslim ibn Aqeel is? You think I would be a hypocrite and sell out Muslim ibn Aqeel and Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam? I'm much better than that. Go find Muslim ibn Aqeel somewhere else. But from me you will not get the information. So at that moment, the city of Kufa, from being under total control of Muslim ibn Aqeel, completely switches. The table turns. That's basically what happens. And Ibn Ziyad was an expert in spreading fear in the hearts of the people of Kufa. It is said that one day, during these days in which he was having a campaign against anyone who supported Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, they saw a man walking in the streets of Kufa, just walking. They immediately capture him. He tells them, why are you capturing me? They take him to prison. They tell him, don't you know that there is a curfew? Unless you are known by the government, unless you are going to your work and your work only, you have absolutely no right to leave your house and walk in the streets of Kufa. He tells them, I'm not even from the city of Kufa. I'm just here to collect money that someone has to give me. I loaned a man an amount of money, and now I'm coming here to collect that money. That's all. And if you want me to leave the city of Kufa, I'm going to leave right now. There's no reason for you to incarcerate me. So they take him to Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad hears the story. He says, I believe him. But you know what? Cut his head. Because if I release him, people are going to say Ibn Ziyad captures people and then releases them. So cut his head so everyone knows that I'm a dangerous man. And the poor man lost his head. So So Muslim ibn Aqeel realizes the situation. Half of the men that supported him in the beginning are now captured. They're incarcerated. The likes of Maytham al-Tammar is imprisoned. Mukhtar al-Thaqafi is imprisoned. And Maytham al-Tammar and Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, they're not just like you and I. They're not ordinary people. There are men worth 1,000. There are men who trained under Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. There are men that actually know the status of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. They're close to the Ahlul Bayt. And they're leaders of their society. When al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi goes somewhere, there's 1,000 people that are walking behind him. When Maytham al-Tammar goes somewhere, there's men walking behind him and following his orders and his commands. So he immediately incarcerated these people. You had the likes of Hani bin Urwa, as I mentioned, incarcerated. He took Hani bin Urwa. Hani bin Urwa was the leader of his tribe. That's thousands of men under him. So essentially the men that pledged allegiance to Muslim ibn Aqeel are now cut in half and more. So Muslim ibn Aqeel is left with 4,000 men in the city of Kufa. They enter before he garners them to go to the palace of Ibn Ziyad, because at that point Ibn Ziyad had essentially started the battle with Muslim. He incarcerated Hani bin Urwa and he killed him. The news of the killing of Hani bin Urwa was mentioned, so they realized that khalas, Ibn Ziyad has essentially begun the war. So Muslim ibn Aqeel, there are two narrations that say, one of them say that he immediately went to the palace, and some of them said no, he went to Masjid al-Kufa to pray Maghrib and Isha. Now, he goes to Masjid al-Kufa. Imagine the scene, brothers and sisters. This is truly a heartbreaking scene. You have 4,000 men with you, believers. You enter Masjid al-Kufa. They pray behind Muslim ibn Aqeel, Salat al-Maghrib, Salat al-Isha. He turns his face. Masjid al-Kufa is empty. 4,000 men. All of a sudden, Masjid al-Kufa is empty. Empty. The only man that is standing in that masjid is Muslim ibn Aqeel. Now we might be judging the people that left Muslim ibn Aqeel, but deep down, how many of us have certainty that when our lives are on the line, how many of us would actually stand up for Muslim ibn Aqeel at that moment? You see, the people of Kufa, those people who betrayed, weren't villains. Alaykum as-salam. They weren't villains. They were just normal people like you and I. But at that moment, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings a test, you either pass or you fail. And when you have a tyrant that spreads the fear in the hearts of the believers, and he incarcerates and he kills the greatest of the believers, of course, the people who have some doubt in their heart will automatically retreat. So Muslim ibn Aqeel turns his face and he sees that the masjid is absolutely empty. And they begin to celebrate the death of Hani bin Urwa in the city of Kufa. The men of Ibn Ziyad, they begin to celebrate the death of Hani bin Urwa. So if there was any chance of anyone coming back and supporting Muslim ibn Aqeel, now it's gone. Because Hani ibn Urwa was basically the most important social figure in the city of Kufa. And now you killed that man. So it means that there are no red lines for this governor. So Muslim ibn Aqeel, He leaves the masjid of Kufa, and it's getting dark, and he realizes that he has no supporter. And he begins to think to himself, I might die, that's okay. But my family, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, Sayyidah Zainab, the companions, the women, the children, they're coming towards Kufa, and Kufa is no longer safe. So Muslim ibn Aqeel, he continues to walk in the alleyways of Kufa until he begins to feel thirsty. He knocks on one of the doors. A lady opens the door and she sees Muslim ibn Aqeel. And please note that there's a curfew at the time, so no one can leave their house. If you leave your house, you're under danger. So she immediately rebukes him. She tells him, oh man, what are you doing here? You're trying to get us killed? Go away, go back to your house. He tells her, I'm thirsty. Can you please give me a cup of water? So she immediately goes and gives him a cup of water. He drinks. And then she notices that Muslim ibn Aqeel is not leaving. He's standing by the house. So she asks him, do you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you not have fear of Allah? He tells her, yes, of course I have fear of Allah. Then she tells him, then I do not permit you to stand by my house. Go away. Go back to your family. He looks at her and he tells her, I don't have family. Is it okay if I spend the night in your house? She looks at him and she tells him, why don't you have your family? Where is your family? He tells her, I am Muslim ibn Aqeel. When she hears Muslim ibn Aqeel, she begins to slap her face and she begins to cry. Oh Muslim, just weeks ago, just days ago, you had 18,000 men. You had 18,000 men. Where are these men? She tells him, of course, enter. You are the most welcome. He enters, she brings him food, he says no. And her name was Taw'a. He tells her, Taw'a, I'm good, I don't want to eat. It's okay. I just want a house to spend the night in. If you can please get me a cup of water so I can do wudu. I want to spend the last moments of my life praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he begins to pray and pray and pray. And Taw'a, as a believer, as a mother, as a woman, of course she has, a kind, soft heart. So she continues. She goes to the room, checks up on Muslim, comes back. She would check up on him every now and then. So her son notices. He notices that his mother is going to the room, to the guest room very often. So he asks her. She tells him, you have to swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you will not tell. He swears on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will not tell. So she tells him, we have Muslim ibn Aqeel in our house. At that moment, the shaitan comes to him. He tells him, Ibn Ziyad has a bounty on the head of this man. This man is going to lose anyways, so why help him? So he immediately hurries to the palace of Ibn Ziyad, and he tells Ibn Ziyad, Muslim ibn Aqeel is in our house. Moments later, the men of Ibn Ziyad are at the house of Muslim ibn Aqeel. Muslim ibn Aqeel, the brave warrior that he is, begins to fight them one after the other. It is said that 300 men were sent to capture Muslim ibn Aqeel, and it was under the leadership of Mohammed ibn al-Ash'ath. Mohammed ibn al-Ash'ath sent a letter back or sends news back to Ibn Ziyad, and he tells him, Ibn Ziyad, send me more men. He tells him, I sent you to capture one man. I sent 300 people. And you cannot kill and cannot capture Muslim ibn Aqeel. He tells him, you sent me to capture the son of Aqeel, the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib, a man from Bani Hashim. You expect me to kill him with 300 men? And this is narrated in the traditions of other schools of thought. Now some of you might think this is an exaggeration. Open the books of other schools of thought that talk about the city of Kufa, and you will read this narration. Muslim ibn Aqeel continues to fight bravely until they dig a hole. Muslim ibn Aqeel with his horse, he is fighting and he falls into the hole. They immediately capture Muslim ibn Aqeel. At that moment, Muslim ibn Aqeel begins to cry. Someone looks at him and tells him, "Oh Muslim, do you not claim that you are fighting for the hereafter? Then why are you crying? You're receiving what you wanted." He tells him, "I am not crying for myself. I am crying for Hussein. I am crying for the orphans. I am crying for my family, for the companions that are heading to Kufa on their way right now. I'm not crying for myself." They take him to the house, to the palace of Ibn Ziyad. If someone can turn off the lights, please. They take him to the palace of Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad looks at him and begins to curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. He begins to curse the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Imagine the scene. A man is captured and they are cursing his family. Muslim ibn Aqeel tells him, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are the right ones. And there will be a day in which you will be faced by punishment. Ibn Ziyad orders his men to take Muslim ibn Aqeel to the rooftop of the palace, to the highest floor of the palace. They place him on the edge of the rooftop and they offer him a cup of water. Muslim ibn Aqeel, he holds the cup of water and drops of blood fall on the cup of water. Muslim ibn Aqeel throws the water away. The water is now najis. He refuses to drink. At that moment, they place the head of Muslim ibn Aqeel and they behead him. Rahimallah man nada wa muslimah. You see, brothers and sisters, Muslim ibn Aqeel was with Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam until the last moment of his life. They had many similarities. They were very close to each other. Muslim ibn Aqeel was married to the sister of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, and that is Ruqayyah. Ruqayyah bint Amir al-Mu'mineen, not the younger Ruqayyah. And Muslim ibn Aqeel and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had many similarities, including similarities in their very own death. Muslim was one of the very few companions that actually died by beheading. Most of them died in the battle, but Muslim ibn Aqeel died while he was beheaded. Muslim ibn Aqeel died thirsty, and so did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And lastly, when they beheaded the head of Muslim ibn Aqeel, they threw his body down from the rooftop and they crushed his bones. You know who else got his bones crushed? That was Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, when they trampled his head, when they trampled his body with the horses. Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam receives the news. They tell him, "Oh Abi Abdullah, the body of Muslim ibn Aqeel and the body of Hani ibn Urwa are dragging through the city of Kufa." Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam begins to cry. He calls for a small girl, a daughter of Muslim ibn Aqeel. She was only 7 years old. Her name was Hamida. All of you, many of you have daughters. He holds Hamida and he begins to cry and he wipes on her head. Hamida at that moment notices that Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam is acting differently. She tells him, "Oh Aba Abdullah, oh uncle, did my father die?" Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam very beautifully says, "Oh Hamida, I am now your father. You are like Ruqayya to me, oh Hamida. I will take care of you." But I ask you, on the 10th day of Muharram, who was there to protect Hamida? Who was there to protect Ruqayya? Who was there to protect the women when they burned the tents of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam? Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. All together 10 times. يا الله 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 يا الله. Brothers and sisters, many of people have been saying that they have sick ones, they have ill family members, members that they want you to pray for. All of us have needs. Let us all recite أمن يجيب 5 times. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أمن أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. One last time. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم اشف مرضانا. اللهم اكشف الهموم عن قلوبنا. Oh Allah, if there is anything on our chest, on our heart that we are troubled with, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make it smooth, make it easy. Oh Allah, grant us our wish if our wish is accepted by you. Oh Allah, if it benefits us in this dunya and the year after, then we want that. If not, then oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know best. Oh Allah, forgive our sins. Oh Allah, accept our deeds. Oh Allah, allow us to be the servants of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam in these very nights. Oh Allah, grant us the intercession of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Brothers and sisters, let us stand up in respect for the Imam of our time. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه وفي كل وليا وقائدا ودليلا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآله
صل على